Welcome back, viewers. What a story. What a story. Neelima, I am intrigued. I have to read this book. Yes, I know you have given me the book. I'm so sorry I haven't taken the time out. But we were talking about media. We were talking about the National Herald newspaper. How did it all change into the Times of India? How did that come about?
So, the Times of India, like I told you, my father was obsessed with controlling or having control over some newspaper. So just before independence, it was, I think it was early in 1947, yeah. He met with the owners of Times of India, and he said that he took his blank checkbook and he placed it on the table with that meeting, and he said that I want to buy. It was owned by Bennett Coleman and Company, which it still is.
It is, yeah.
And so they were a bit reluctant to do that, and they said that I don't know why my memory fails me. I don't know who the English gentleman was who was dealing with the main the Times of India CEO, you could call it at that time. And he said that Mr. Dalmia, I have reared Times of India like my own baby.
Right.
And my father said that, sir, this baby needs to change hands now. And he signed that check and he placed it in front of him. He said, fill in the amount that you want. So that's how Times of India changed hands, and my father acquired Bennett Coleman.
Right.
And coming back to then the hostility with Nehru. So once he had got this instrument, which he felt was his power tool to achieving whatever he wanted to do, his goal, because my father was politically very ambitious.
Right.
He started these personal editorial articles on the Times of India, the front page, soon after partition, that the plight of the refugees is solely the doing of the Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. So it became like a personal battle between them. Every morning, so India would wake up to the front page of Times of India showing this lambasting of the Prime Minister. And he made it a crusade, because he went from refugee camp to refugee camp. He had the means and he had the money, and he rained largesse on them, and he had these crowds rousing to his speeches, you know, and it's saying that Dalmia is the hero, and so it became a bit of a law and order security problem. And there's a recorded letter that Nehru has written to his sister, where he says that Dalmia's rhetoric is worrisome. The crowds listen to him because he has the means and the money.
Right.
So it became like a personal battle. Nehru could not fight back. I mean, there was no way he could stop the newspaper, and my father continued relentlessly.
Right.
He didn't want to stop, because he wanted, and he really believed that the partition could have been avoided if Jinnah was made the Prime Minister. And Nehru was too selfish, and at that time, because Gandhiji was totally partial towards Nehru, he was made Prime Minister, and the rest was history.
Right, yes.
So that's where it escalated, the whole battle between my father and Nehru.
Okay.
And to continue, I'll tell you that you said, did the British try to pull him down? I said, no, it was Nehru who did pull him down.
So while all this was happening, when were the marriages taking place?
So the years, I won't be able to tell you. I'll just tell you the year my mother was married, which is 46.
Okay.
So there was a parallel life of my father. It was an alternate world that he lived in.
Okay.
One of the things which came out, which I used to often ask, why did my father seek so many women? Why did he want to get married?
Yes.
He didn't have the time for them. Each one was presented with this 3-4 acre huge big palatial bungalow in Lachin's Delhi, and for people who are familiar, Lachin's Delhi is where all the creme de la creme live. The government houses are there, the ministers all live there. And he didn't have time for them. I don't know. I don't think it was a libidinal thing. I don't think it was that. So what was it? And finally, there are two things which emerged. One was that my father's first wife, very much like Gandhiji's first wife, was a year older than him. They were a child married couple. He was 12 and she was 13. And he carried this burden of guilt all his life, that he was very cruel to her. She died at the age of 15 of tuberculosis.
Oh my God, okay.
So he carried this guilt that I have been very cruel to her, and I have to make amends for that. So I am going to marry the woman who is reborn in the soul of Narmada.
Okay.
That was her name.
Okay.
So one of the theories is that he had a quest that he wanted to find Narmada to make amends with her.
With her, okay.
And whichever woman reminded him of her, or he felt that maybe this is Narmada in her next incarnation, he married her.
Okay.
And was soon disillusioned by that woman, because there was no way of determining whether it was Narmada or not.
Yeah.
And he would tire of that wife and move on to the next.
Right.
The second theory which emerged, which I feel makes sense, and the second theory which emerged, with now a lot of my relatives and my mother also tells me, is that another astrologer had told him that your son from your seventh wife will be a Chhatrapati.
Okay.
And Chhatrapati, loosely translated, means emperor, like
Alexander the Great.
Like
Yes,
Alexander
yes,
the Great.
that's true. Yeah.
But I don't give much credence to that, because my father, unlike a lot of Marwadi businessmen, did not favor his sons.
Okay.
All his 11 girls were his more favored children.
So he believed in women empowerment then, which we are believing in now.
Exactly.
Wow.
Oh, in many ways
so he was a visionary.
yes, he was a visionary, and in many ways he was born too early of his time. He should have been born now.
Okay.
With all his economic wizardry and his brain in finance, he would have been, nobody could have touched him.
Right, right, right.
So the second theory, where he said that he wanted that a boy would be, I don't think that holds any water.
Any
because
credence?
no, because he adored his daughters. And the eldest daughter, whose husband finally took away Bennett Coleman from him, who he groomed as his own son.
Right.
Who he gave 1/3 of his industrial empire to after the partition. She was his most darling daughter.
So the blue-eyed girl.
The
I wouldn't
girl.
call her the blue-eyed boy, but yeah, the blue-eyed girl.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I'm sure that must have been a very emotional time for you all.
You know, I was not born at that time. When she was there, she was much older than me. My mother was younger than her.
The eldest daughter. Okay.
Yeah. But emotional time in the sense that it was not an easy childhood. We came from a troubled home because my father was never there for us.
Right.
And he had this strange, quirky behavior that if his wife was not his darling wife at that time, then her children were not his darling children at that time.
Okay.
So it was a universal, like a yardstick of his behavior.
Right.
If he was unhappy with my mother, then he had no time for us.
Okay.
And if he was unhappy with one of my other stepmothers, he had no time for her children.
Okay.
So I think the most affected was us, because my mother was the youngest and her honeymoon or golden period lasted only 7 years, in which all 7 of us were born.
Okay.
And after that he went back to his older wife.
Okay.
And so we had a very troubled childhood. It was a broken home.
Right.
And my mother was saddled with this 7 of us, each one more independent and more quirky and more bizarre in their behavior than the other. She didn't know how to handle. We were too much for her. We were a handful.
Wow.
And life was hard. We grew up hearing from her all the time, with my father with his billions in his estate and industry and everything. So I grew up hearing always, your father's not going to leave anything for you. You should study hard and take up jobs. And you know, so it's such a contradictory and such a traumatizing thing that it's your environment is telling you something else.
Yes.
But the conflict is there, a crying, depressive mother the whole time. And the sad part is that my mother could have been a very strong woman. She was before she married my father.
Okay.
She almost joined the freedom movement. She was in correspondence with Nehruji, who told her that she went to meet him there in Wardha.
Okay.
And he told her that we need women like you. Go to Nagpur and meet Maulana Azad. He gave her a letter that, you know, go and join the movement. And that was the time when she made the decision. She had to choose between R.K. Dalmia and the freedom movement.
Yes,
and she made the fatal choice of R.K. Dalmia. If she had chosen the freedom movement, she would have been one of the first women cabinet ministers of the country. And then she just dumbed herself down to becoming a nomad. She was mortified of him. She was absolutely mortified of him, because she always felt that If suddenly he just abandons me, where will I go with my 7 children?
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So it was a very trying and a difficult time.
Okay.
And I think that after I wrote my book, I exorcised a whole lot of ghosts and phantoms from inside me.
Okay.
And I grew up with a great angst against my father, because I felt that we were neglected children, and even if he didn't love his wife, he had no business to neglect
But
us.
how was your relationship with your father?
My relationship with my father, the little it was,
Yeah.
because he died when I was 24 years
Okay.
old. He got me married to my husband. But he was a father in absentia. If
Okay.
I wanted something from him, I had to phone him to tell him. So
Right.
much so that I had to call him and tell him, hey Dad, it's my birthday today.
Okay. Okay.
So, okay, what do you want? And I
Right.
would say, I want a cycle, or I want
Right.
a
Yeah.
ticket to go to Calcutta,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Right.
But in phases, I remember happy parts of my relationship with him, because every time he came to see us, you know,
Yeah.
it was a difficult time. My mother was scared what is going to happen when he
Okay.
came. And once in a few days, he would come to visit us.
Right.
And she would say, all of you sit there now with him, because God knows what he's
Yeah.
going to say. It wasn't accusations or,
Yeah.
you know, things of the other sort.
Yeah.
And every time he walked in, he would look at me and he would find me eating something or the other. And he
Okay.
said, you eat the whole day. Every time I see you, you're just eating. And he used to also say that you're the only one of my children who can make me laugh. So
Wow, what a compliment,
it was
you know?
a compliment, yeah. But it's a strange thing that I thought I was a neglected child. I
Right.
thought that my father was partial to my stepbrothers and sisters, and he didn't give us the same amount of, leave alone material things, but love.
Okay. Okay.
Because material things also occupy a second
Yeah,
rate. You
yeah,
want that love.
Right.
And the strange thing is that I met one of my brothers-in-law, my stepsister's husband, one of my,
Okay.
who I hadn't met in a long time. I met him the first time, and he told me, but you know, everybody in our home thought that you were Pitaji's favorite daughter.
Okay.
So I don't know what they meant by that.
Right.
It was a perception, but I do remember the happy moments.
Mhm.
But those are few and far between.
Okay.
And when I wrote my book, I realized there's so much angst inside me, which I didn't even know was there.
Right. Right.
But the good thing that happened was that I have come to terms, I've reached a kind of Zen space in my head where I don't hold my father responsible for any of the torment that I was put through as a child.
Okay.
Nor do I blame him for what happened to my mother. Nor do I blame my stepmothers for what they did to us.
Right.
Because I feel that they did, for everybody it was a matter of survival.
Right. 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 Right.
Every time he took on another wife.
So I'm going to ask you, when do you think your father reached the plateau of his life?
Just before independence.
Just before
Yeah.
independence.
Because his troubles began, I think his downfall began in 1950.
Okay.
And I'll tell you how, very briefly I'll tell you, I've mentioned it in my book,
Mhm.
is that when he started lambasting the Prime Minister on the front pages, so
Okay.
he created a huge big hostility
Mhm.
amongst the pro-government people and amongst his own family, because at that time the family was joined. So his brother and his son-in-law, that is my eldest sister's
Yes.
husband, his blue-eyed daughter's
Yeah.
husband, they got jittery.
Okay.
And they asked my mother, because my mother was the darling wife at
Right.
that time,
Okay.
that please tell him that we want a partition.
Okay.
And my father and his bravado, because he was a megalomaniac. He had grandiose ideas about himself.
Okay.
He had so much like supreme confidence that what if everything is taken away from me today, I'll make it all again.
Mhm.
So when he heard that they want a partition, he said that aside from Bennett Coleman and Samai Madhavpur Cement Company, which was a company which was the largest in Asia, and they were going to be, it was still being constructed and
Okay.
things. He said, apart from that, let them take what they want to.
Mhm. Mhm.
So he was willing to part with everything else except
Right.
that. So the partition happened in 2-3 days, which I think, you know, such a huge big estate was partitioned, and everything went to whoever took what they wanted to, and he was left with these two and a few other companies and whatever was left.
Okay.
Meanwhile, what had happened was in 1951,
Yeah.
Firoz Gandhi and Nehru had their own hostility. There's a history
Yes.
of hostility between the Prime Minister and his son-in-law.
Yeah.
So Firoz Gandhi raised a question in Parliament at that time, saying that the Prime Minister has colluded with the insurance company owners, one of the insurance companies. In fact, the main insurance, Bharat Insurance Company, was owned by my father.
Right, okay.
So the Prime Minister has colluded with him and the shipping owners,
Mhm.
which was Mundra of
Yeah.
that time,
Mhm.
and has defrauded the government of a whole lot of money.
Okay.
So these two, in collusion with the Prime Minister, have enacted this whole big fraud.
Right.
Nehru got the chance he was looking for.
Great.
Because meanwhile,
Yeah.
this thing had escalated to unimaginable proportions.
Sure.
So he instituted a commission for inquiry,
Okay.
and a retired judge was made the head of that commission to
Okay.
look into the irregularities of the Bharat Insurance Company.
Okay.
As luck would have it, Bharat Insurance Companies did have irregularities, because on the advice of an astrologer,
Mhm.
again an astrologer
Astrologer,
comes
okay,
in.
yeah.
Astrologers are like permanent fixtures in my father's life.
Right, right, right.
So on the advice of an astrologer, he had taken out the securities from the insurance company, and
Mhm.
he had put it into speculation on forward trading on some silver, in which he suffered a huge big loss.
Okay.
So when this was under investigation and scrutiny, so all
Mhm.
these things were found.
Right.
By then he wanted to, so my father thought it prudent at that time that I should raise this money. It was 3.5 crores at that time. I can't even tell you what is the equivalent of it today.
Today, yeah.
He thought that if he raises this money and he puts it back into the securities, that
Yeah.
it will absolve him of the crime. Okay, I
Right.
took it, but I put it back.
Sure.
A lawyer from England was hired at that time,
Mhm.
one Mr. Dinglefoot, and I don't remember his first name, who
Okay.
later went on to be the Labour minister in the government. We're talking of now the 50s.
50s, okay.
At that time, Taha, he
Mhm.
used to charge 1 lakh rupees a day
Wow.
for the hearing. You can quantify it what it was.
I can't even
Mr.
imagine.
Dinglefoot, and my father didn't listen to anybody. He was
Right.
bullheaded when it came to his own decision making.
Right.
And Dinglefoot advised him that you don't need to put these securities back. We'll fight the case, whatever
Right.
it has to be. It's not going to absolve you of his crime.
Sure.
But he was at that time determined that I have to put this
Okay.
this back into the
Into the system.
into the
Yeah.
insurance fund.
Yeah.
So he had to raise that money.
Yeah.
Now, nobody from the government, nobody from the public was willing to bail out a man who was opposing the government.
Government and
Nobody
being
wanted to take,
investigated by the
investigated by Nehru. Natural
Yes.
fear.
Natural fear.
So he turned to his brother, and he turned to his son-in-law. So his
Right.
brother said, I don't have it. His son-in-law at
So,
that time,
yeah.
where the treachery comes in,
Mhm.
is that he said that I can give it to you, but I want
Bennett and Coleman.
Bennett Coleman, and I want Savai Madhavpur cement.
Okay.
So
Got
my
it.
father had to part with that.
Right,
And he
right.
said, okay.
Mhm.
So the understanding was, which I am told,
Mhm.
I can't be sure about this,
Okay.
but family legend has it that the understanding was that I will pay the money back to you, and I'll take both the
Take both the
companies back.
Okay.
But the chips were down, planets were not favoring him. It was a day, ill-fated day crossed by the stars.
Mm-hmm.
He lost the case.
Okay.
He lost it. He fought right up till the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
He lost in the Supreme Court.
Okay.
He was jailed for 2 years
I see. Okay.
by the Nehru government.
By the Nehru government.
So
okay.
he lost his credibility.
Yeah.
He lost his 2 companies.
Mhm.
He lost his face. He had to go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
And when he came out, everything had changed.
Right. Right.
So that was the beginning of his downfall.
So, Neelima, what is the highlight of this book? Can you tell our viewers? So, I am curious. I'm thinking how curious are the viewers right now, but what is the highlight of this book?
For
What do you
me,
think?
if you ask me what is the punch of this book,
Mhm.
is the mind of this man.
Mhm.
And very sadly, I have to say that in all 18 of us, not one single of his children have even 1/1,000,000th of his genius.
Wow.
He was a misunderstood man.
Mhm.
He was too early for his times.
Right.
He was a victim of political vendetta.
Right. Right. Right.
But he never said die.
Yeah. Yeah.
He never said die. And I have to tell you that in my legacy from my father, apart from the fact that I belong to that gene pool which I'm so supremely proud of,
Mm-hmm.
apart from the fact that my father had no time for us,
Mm-hmm.
but the greatest legacy my father gave me, and I think I have reflected it in all my writings and all 3 of my books, is fearlessness and candor.
Wow.
And during his worst time, just before his Supreme Court judgment was going to come, my father took out a pamphlet which he circulated to all the parliament members because he wanted to appeal to them, you know, that, okay, this is injustice being done to me.
Right.
And that book was called Fearlessness.
Okay.
I still have it with me. It's my bedside table book.
Okay.
And I say this very proudly, that the greatest legacy I've inherited from R.K. Dalmia is his fearlessness. And that is what is this book all about.
Great. That is amazing to learn today. And you know what? Till today, I am a late 70s baby, if I may say. So, till today, I read the Times of India every single morning without fail.
Yes,
so
do
I. That is
so do I.
That is the legacy he's left behind.
Yes.
So Neelima, what is the next venture from here? What is the next book you think you're
You know, like every writer who gets heady on fame and on the fact that suddenly you're positioned in a place where people recognize you for something more than just your family name. Yes, I will write.
Okay.
I am looking for something, and I always say this, that I don't choose my subjects choose me.
I remember that.
So
yeah.
I said that to you in my last interview as well. I am waiting. I have a space in my head just now. Kasturba hasn't left me.
Okay.
She's still traveling with me all over. I'm still going to be talking at the JLF, and I was at the SOAS a couple of days ago. I don't have the mind space just now. I haven't consciously thought of anything. There are a few floating ideas in my head.
Right.
But I know that the subject will grab me by my collar and not let me rest till I've said it all.
So I'm going to guess and say it will be about politics then.
Inshallah, let's see.
It's great, it's great. Now, I think you've done a brilliant job, and I will stress to our viewers, you must read this book. I mean, after listening to this interview, who will not want to read this book? I mean, I am a fanatic of Times of India, let me put it this way. And I will take this liberty of saying on screen that today is one of the best interviews I've done. I have not used a single word from the script. So viewers, you can imagine what an interesting person I have sitting here next to me, who I didn't have to use a single question from the teleprompter.
Thank you.
So, you know, Neelima, thank you very much for coming to the studio. And on that note, I'll say thank you to our viewers who are watching us tonight. And please give us a last message before we go.
So the greatest honor for me, Taha, something that I could never have dreamt of, is the fact that I'm sitting in a studio here in London and I'm talking to you on a channel which I'm told has 1 million viewers.
Yes, we do.
So my voice is being heard by that many people, and I don't have words of gratitude for that.
Thank you very much, Neelima. Thank you, and thank you viewers for watching us.
Bye-bye.